We are in front of 99 Ryerson Street, the former home of the great American poet Walt Whitman. My name is Brad Vogel, and I am the head of the Coalition to Save Walt Whitman's House. Whitman was a force in changing American poetry into a whole new paradigm. He really sets the entire American project off on a whole new course. Leading up to Walt Whitman in the early 19th century, most American literature sort of followed the European norms, and it's with Whitman, when he published his Leaves of Grass in 1855, when he lived in this house, that American poetry sort of breaks free. Whitman and his family moved into this house in May of 1855. He was actually a contractor building houses here in Brooklyn. This house, even though he only lived here for 1 year, from May of 1855 to May of 1856, there was this great ferment and sort of buzz in Brooklyn as the city grew and industry grew. Whitman is here riding that wave, and you actually see in the poetry of Leaves of Grass some of that frantic, frenetic energy. This house is significant because Whitman finished up Leaves of Grass when he was living here. He lived in the second floor with his brother. He receives visits here from numerous different literary figures, transcendental figures. Whitman sent Ralph Waldo Emerson, as one of the great literary figures of the day, a copy of that first edition of Leaves of Grass. And in writing a response to Whitman, there's a very famous line, which is, "I greet you at the beginning of a great career." Emerson follows up on his letter and actually comes down from Concord, Massachusetts to visit him here at this house. Leaves of Grass was still coming into its final form of the first edition. As Whitman would walk from this house through Brooklyn, there's one part in section 24 of Song of Myself, one of the main poems from Leaves of Grass, that actually seems to deal with this house. That I walk up my stoop, I pause to consider if it really be a morning glory at my window satisfies me more than the metaphysics of books. And so it's truly this little contemplative moment as he's walking up the stoop into this very building. This is our anchor for Whitman in New York. This house is very humble, but the question remains, what is the value of this building as a landmark? And even though it's not a pristine architectural gem, the value is in the cultural content, the connection to something bigger, to something broader, to a really pivotal moment in American literary history. He changed poetry and sort of created a new poetry that was distinctly American. Whitman starts writing about everyday things, everyday people, and he exalts the everyday. People finally have someone, when they're all living in cities, that can speak for their experience. Also, this would be a site, if landmark, that was finally another site speaking to the history that has so long been overlooked of LGBT people. People can come by, and even if they have no access to the interior, if they can just look at this house and think of Walt Whitman writing that work over 150 years ago in this space and looking out at the world from this particular vantage point, I think that's valuable. I think that even if this house is covered with terrible siding, there are still original bones of this house that were here when Walt Whitman himself was formulating this whole new view of the world, and that to me is exciting.